There's a moment in life that almost nobody prepares you for. It's not dramatic and it doesn't usually come with alarm bells or like a crisis warning. It's it comes quietly. It doesn't announce itself even really as change because it's this subtle moment that happens when your life still looks right from the outside. Everything is right according to paper, right? It's good on paper, but it no longer feels right. Even though you usually don't really know why, it's not obvious as to why. You might still be really successful and, very respected um in the roles that you play. You might be doing the exact thing that you once dreamed of doing. And yet, there is something in here that starts to kinda whisper at you that says, like, "This is not where I'm supposed to be anymore." And that moment is really fucking confusing, okay? Because there's, like, nothing visibly wrong, nothing inherently wrong that anybody could point a finger at and say, "That's why you're feeling this way." But you can still feel that something is missing. And for me, that moment started last year, the end of 2025. As 2025 was coming to a close, it happened inside my career as a contemporary artist. Art was never just something I did. It was and is how I make sense of the world. It's how I processed emotions. It's how I communicate when words are not enough. Art always has been and always will be a part of who I am. And I built a life around that. Slowly and intentionally, passionately, with so much passion. I was so excited to do it. Endless, countless hours of creating, literally thousands of hours spent in the studio. Years of building and showing work, building credibility, and also years of, I mean, let's be really honest about it, years of tying my own worth, my inherent worth to my ability to produce something meaningful, right? Like something unique, something different. That's been my jam. My worth was tied to look at this stuff I can create. I can make stuff that's never been done before. And it was true. I did. And for a while, it fulfilled me on a very, very deep level. For a while, it genuinely felt like home to me. And I knew during that time that I was doing exactly what I was meant to be doing. Like it felt right. There's something really precious, maybe even sacred, we could say, about building a life from something purely creative, right? There's something pretty incredible about succeeding in a field where people, trust me when I say, people constantly tell you it's impossible to succeed in. Like, if you are a creative and you're watching this, if you're an artist in some way and you're watching this, then you have inevitably experienced at some point people telling you you can't succeed. You can't make a life out of that, right? Like you can't actually be successful financially out of that. And there's something really, really, truly amazing about doing it in spite of all the naysayers, in spite of everybody that tells you that you can't. There's something really satisfying about doing it. And honestly, there's something pretty validating about people seeing your work and connecting with it and valuing it. It's hard to articulate even standing in a gallery and watching people react to my work and seeing them, knowing, having them tell me that it's moved them in some way, that they've connected with it, that it has spoken to them on a level that nobody else can see, right? There's something very just inherently validating and beautiful about that. And just to be clear, I didn't decide to leave the art world because it somehow like betrayed me. I didn't leave the art world because it changed. I left because I did. And I think that distinction kind of matters. Because I think that too often in this life, we really only give ourselves permission to leave things when they hurt us. Like if something hasn't hurt us, we stay. Happiness be damned, joy be damned, right? We really only say it's okay to walk away from something if there's pain involved. We don't need permission only when it's painful, right? Because sometimes expansion, sometimes evolution of the self asks us to leave things that were once very, very beautiful and maybe still are, but just no longer fit the person that we're becoming. And that's different than most people talk about. That shift for me did not happen all it did not happen all at once, okay? It started with small feelings that I really couldn't explain, I didn't understand. And I remember the first time that the question, "Is this really where I'm supposed to be?" like, kinda whispered through my mind, it was a while ago. I mean, we're talking, a year and a half ago that that question first popped into my brain, and I shoved it violently away. Like, immediately and violently away because I wasn't even gonna entertain such a thought. I was like, excuse me, of course I'm where I'm supposed to be. Where did that even come from?" Like, "Fuck you, brain. No. No, I'm not even gonna go there," right? I pushed it away and I pretended that I hadn't even heard it. I mean, I literally like, it was so fleeting, and the fact that I remember it says that it stood out to me then, right? It tells me that it was very poignant to me, but I pretended like it was nothing. Nope, just a fleeting thought. Nope, gone. But the longer that I went on, just continuing on in this life that I was living, the more that those thoughts, started to kind of whisper, the more frequently I heard them, the more often those questions would pop up and float through my mind. Pretty much it got to the point where, like, anytime my head was quiet, I would start to hear them again. "Is this where you're supposed to be? Do you feel like this is where you're meant to be?" And I just, whoop, every time, just shove them away, because there'd be these moments where even during that time, even when these questions were becoming more frequent, there were moments where everything still was going okay. Like, everything was going fine. There was nothing like wrong. I just had started to lose excitement about it. Like, I just didn't feel as excited about this path as I did before. And then as 2025 kind of started to come to an end, we're coming into fall, and I got to this point where, my last show in 2025 was in September. And I felt like at that point, creating was almost obligatory. Like, it almost felt like I had to. And that just had such a heaviness connected to it, instead of like feeling inspired to go into my studio like I used to. And I'd spend hours or even entire days, not kidding, not exaggerating, entire days. I would wake up, skip my workout, go straight into the studio, and I would be in there for 8, 9 hours. I wouldn't even leave unless I just was about to like pee my pants. Like, and then I'd go right back in there. I would lose time. Happily lose time. Like, that was, I can't count the number of days that went exactly like that. I would go in there in the morning and I wouldn't come out until nighttime. And I'd realize I hadn't even eaten all day. I hadn't done anything else all day. I hadn't checked my phone. I had nothing. I had just been in creation mode and I was happy about it. It felt blissful because I just lost time, completely and totally absorbed in whatever I was working on. Like, have you ever felt that way? Something that just, time stops existing. That's what art always was for me. That's what creating my sculptures became for me. And then it turned into, this time that I'm talking about, it turned into something so heavy. It just felt like this feeling. I felt absolutely zero desire to spend time in the one place that had been my safe haven. It had been my sanctuary. This was the one place that had brought me solitude and peace. And there were a lot of things in my life over the last few years that have been anything but peaceful. And I would go in there and I would find this sanctuary of just beautiful bliss where I could just, time stopped and I just flowed in this state that I didn't feel anywhere else. And so the one place that had brought me so much peace and so much solitude, it became the very last place I wanted to be, which is crazy. It's such a crazy contradiction that it felt confusing to me. But I didn't understand it, but I did know that I felt like every time I thought about working, every time I thought about going in there, I just felt tired. I literally felt drained even at the thought of it. Like, even the night before, and I'm looking at my calendar and I have 4 hours to be in the studio, or I have, whatever it is. And because I just tend to do that the night before to like wrap my mind around what I'm doing the next day. And so I'd pull up my calendar and I'd look and I'd see like studio in this block of time and I would just feel drained. Like even right then, like I hadn't even done it yet. It's the next morning that I'm supposed to be doing it. And I just felt like, oh God. And I couldn't explain it. And it genuinely upset me so badly. It frustrated me, but it made me sad too because creating for a living was what I had dreamed of. It was literally like, I feel like choked up emotionally right now just talking about it because I remember being a little girl and thinking that that's what I wanted to do, not really understanding the art world in its entirety, but thinking that I wanted to be an artist. I remember winning art competitions when I was very young and thinking, this is it. Like, this is how I do that. And then I got older and my own self-esteem issues got in the way and I didn't think I was good enough and all the things. And so I put all that on the back burner. But when I came back to this full force, the art path, when I came back full force, I went to college and my major became three-dimensional art. I was in it and I dreamed of this. I dreamed of creating for a living and doing shows and having my work be what supported myself and my family financially. It is what I dreamed of. It's what I wanted, damn it. And so having this sense of almost like foreboding, this almost like a sense of just heavy gloom come over me when I thought about going into the studio was like almost like it felt like I was betraying myself somehow. And I mean, I kept trying, I kept at it. I kept trying to force myself to go in there saying like, "Okay, I've got this. Like I'm just going to go in there. I have no agenda today. I'm like maybe that's it. Maybe I just need to take the agenda away. Maybe I need to not work on this or do this, but I just need to go in there and have fun." Right? Just take it back to the beginning when I was just going in there and just creating shit just for the fun of it, right? Like maybe I need to do that. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then I would literally walk through the door and it felt like my energy like all the energy in my body was just zapped right out of me. And I would just lose any type of inspiration, or to be honest, maybe I didn't even have any to begin with. And I was just trying to convince myself I did, but the inspiration was gone. I remember once I was standing in the middle of my studio and I was literally just standing there. I don't even know how long I stood there, minutes, hours, days, I'm not sure. But I stood in the middle of my studio and I just felt almost like disassociated from my own body. Like I felt so uninspired. I just stood there and stared. And it was so like, I tried so hard for so long to talk myself out of those feelings. And I said the things that we all say when we're trying to like motivate ourselves, I guess is maybe the word. Like when we're trying to like push ourselves into something we really don't want to do. It's like, okay, come on, Corey. Like you worked so hard for this. People would love to be where you are. Like people would kill to have this life that you've built, to have a studio in their own home that they create and they get to show for a living. Like people would love this. Like, come on. Maybe you're just tired. Like maybe you just need a break, like all the things that we tell ourselves. And honestly, I think maybe even to some extent, those things were true. I was exhausted. I had worked because I'd had multiple shows, and anybody that's done a show and has done multiple inside a year knows it's exhausting. I mean, you're creating nonstop. It is go, 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 go. I was tired. Okay. And I think that that's true for a lot of us a lot of times, like, yeah, we are just tired. Like, yes, we do need a break, but sometimes those are the things that we say when we are trying to negotiate with a truth that is inside of us that we're not ready to accept yet. Like we know it's true somewhere deep inside, but we're trying to still like make a deal with it, right? We're still trying to like negotiate that because it all comes down to we're not ready to accept it yet. Because a part of us, like even though there is a part of us that recognizes how deeply that truth is resonating, deep inside us, like we feel it hitting home in a deep way. But we also, I think, know it's going to require a sacrifice to follow that truth. So we try to pretend like we don't hear it. We push the thoughts away. We ignore the questions and we try to pretend like it's not an actual conflict happening inside of us. For a long time, For months, I convinced myself that what I was feeling was burnout because burnout makes sense. Burnout makes sense, right? Like my logic, like my conscious mind can rationalize that. Burnout makes sense. Oh yeah, I've just burned out, right? Burnout has solutions. And that's the thing is like if it's a problem that has a solution, that's easy. We got it. Burnout's remedied with rest, with, solid, clear boundaries and with time off. And those things matter. But eventually, I had to sit with a harder truth, which is what if I wasn't exhausted from working too hard? What if I was exhausted not in my body, but in my soul because I was holding on to something that I had outgrown? The thing is, burnout says you need recovery, misalignment says you need transformation. And transformation is, God, so much harder because it asks you to change the structure of your life, not just your schedule. And there's a big difference, right? There's a big difference between the two. There's a phase of transformation that nobody really talks about because it's not the before or the after. And that's what we like to focus on culturally. Like we're obsessed with the before and after photos, right? Like, look, I was broke and homeless on the street and now I'm a billionaire, right? Like we're like, oh, woo, look, I was 400 pounds overweight and now I'm a model. Ah, and people are like, oh my God, I love your transformation. Like, and it's great. Like it's inspiring. Okay. It is. I'm not going to say it's not. It's inspiring to see the dramatic change, right? But the phase of transformation that I think we need to give more attention to is the in between. It's that phase where you haven't left your old life yet, but you can't fully go back to it either because you started to feel disconnected from it. You started to feel disconnected from the thing that used to define you as a person. And that is an incredibly vulnerable place to be. It's a really awful place to be. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be there because identity gives us stability, right? Like it's solid. It gives us something that we can stand on. It gives us something we can see, we can touch, we can taste it. This is our identity, and I'm here. I live here. This is who I am, right? And it gives us answers when people ask all those irritating small talk questions, like on a first date. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you going in life? What's next? Like, you know what? They're normal questions, whatever. They're harmless questions, but like those questions come up. And when you're standing in your identity, you have an answer. You know exactly what to say because this is who I am. This is what I'm doing, right? But I was reaching a point where I just didn't know how to answer those questions anymore. Not honestly, anyway. Okay. And the reality is I just started to lie because I was so confused about all this turmoil going on that I just continued to answer like I always had. Oh, I've got a show coming up. I'm currently creating work, exploring the concept of blah, 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 like, oh, I just gave the same answers that I had been giving because I didn't have anything else to give. And I'd talk about, all this stuff and just like I always had, and the words lined up like they were supposed to, but I felt like a fraud. Y'all listen, I felt so fake because my heart wasn't in any of it. And honestly, even down to the practical where I'm like, I'm not creating anything right now. I haven't been in the studio in weeks. But you can't really say that, because then it opens up like a whole mess of crap that you don't want to get into with a relative stranger. And so like I just kept answering the way I'd always answered. But I felt like such a fraud. I felt like I was so fake because my heart wasn't in any of it anymore. I was being pulled away from the one thing that I was good at, from the thing that I'd poured so much of myself into, so much of my heart and my soul into. I had literally poured everything I was into my work. And I didn't really truly understand what was happening. So I just kind of like stayed the course, and I just kept answering questions kind of almost like robotically, right? But it felt like every word was somehow like cheapening the passion that I once genuinely felt. And that was so scary to me. And it was so sad to me. It was so sad. I was mourning it. Because when you start losing an identity, it feels like you're losing your place in the world and you truly mourn the loss of it. And that is not easy. One of the hardest parts about this entire, identity death was not just the internal confusion. One of the hardest parts about it was knowing that if I followed what I was feeling pulled to follow, that I might not be understood by anybody. I mean, okay, let's be honest. I knew I wouldn't be understood. I knew nobody was going to get it. I knew they wouldn't get it, and that was scary on a belonging level, right? Because I knew that my family wouldn't understand. I knew even my friends would probably have questions that I genuinely didn't have the answers to. And and I was right. There have been so many conversations where people have told me I'm nuts, or that what I'm doing makes no sense, or that my plan won't work because fill in the blank. And I know they're just trying to help, right? They want me to be safe, they love me, and they just want me to have stability. I get that. I understand that instinct. I have the same instinct about other people. I want them to be safe. I want them to be whole. I want them to be, comfortable. And it's hard to watch them walk through things that aren't. And so I get that. Watching somebody willingly kind of step into something completely uncertain, it's uncomfortable, especially when you love those people. But what I started to realize was this: the biggest risk really wasn't and isn't being misunderstood by others. It's not being judged by the people that you love, even when they think you're stupid or they think you're nuts. The biggest risk, I think, is abandoning that truth that you hear inside because it's inconvenient or because it's uncomfortable or because people don't get it, or even because it's unclear, e- even because you don't get it, right? Like, I think the biggest risk is abandoning that truth for any reason and pretending like you don't hear that voice trying to direct you. And there is a very raw grief in realizing that most of the time, the clearest direction you will ever receive is the one that only you can hear. It's not the one that makes sense to everybody. It's not the one that everybody hears and totally understands and gets it and goes, yeah, let's do this together. Like, no, the clearest direction you'll ever receive is the one that it's only for you. And that is scary. And in that middle, when you're leaving an identity, there is real, genuine grief that comes with it. So much grief. Like, I'm talking body racking sobs grief. It is literally a death. Like, they don't call it an identity death for nothing. They don't call it that to be cute. They say that because there is literally something inside of you that actually feels like it's dying. Or it feels like somebody else has died, someone that you loved deeply, right? And there is a true feeling of loss that it brings and grief. And that grief is messy. Y'all, grief is messy. Okay, let's just be honest about it. Like, grief is not clean cut like in the movies. It's not linear like they show on TV shows. It's messy as fuck, and it leaves you feeling so raw and exposed, like your soul has been drug over a bunch of rusty nails and then, I don't know, broken glass and then burned. That's pretty vivid, but you get the point. It is messy and it leaves you feeling so raw. Even when it's the right decision, that's true. And that's something that I think we need to acknowledge as well. Like, even when it's the right decision, even when you're following the most aligned path for you, you're still going to feel grief at the life you're leaving behind. And it's still going to be messy. And it still won't even make sense at times. Why am I sad about this? I know it's the right decision. I know it's aligned, but even when it's aligned, it doesn't take away the grief. Like, we still mourn the loss of what we're leaving behind. And for months I was going through this. I was genuinely grieving a version of myself that had built that life. I grieved the certainty that came with it, with that life, with knowing who I was, with having the answers to those questions readily available, right? And they were natural and fluid and normal because that's really what was happening in my life. That's really who I was. And I was grieving the loss of all of that. I grieved the safety of having a clear path forward. I know I had shows lined up all the way into 2027. Y'all listen, like, I had shows lined up for the next 2 years. I knew my path forward. I knew what I was doing. And I was grieving the loss of all of that. And sometimes that grief shows up as you trying to hold on to pieces of your old life just long enough to feel like you're not free falling, because free falling is scary. And that's how it showed up for me. Maybe you should hold on to just one of those shows. Maybe you should just keep one of those shows in 2026 and maybe one in 27. I had shows lined up for 2 years. Y'all listen, 2 years out through 27. I was booked out. And that grief kept coming to the surface, that fear. And it was like, "Oh, I mean, maybe just hold on to one." Right? Like, this show is a big show. Like, the one that you're having next year, like, that's a big show. Like, oh, and then that's what you don't know what you're gonna be doing by 2027. Like, may as well keep that one. Right? And that was really just that grief coming up, really just that fear, the grief in different forms, I could say, of just we don't want to feel like there's nothing below us and we're just falling for infinity. So maybe we just hold on to a little bit of it. And it caused me to doubt and second guess myself. Honestly, we live in this culture that rewards certainty. It it doesn't just reward certainty, it depends on it. We are taught from a very young age that we are supposed to have a plan, have a timeline, have outcomes. People ask all the time, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" He's 5. He's not supposed to have that figured out yet. And yet, we push for it. Career explore at 12, right? Let's do career counseling at 13. Oh, what's your plan when you graduate high school? What's your 10-year plan when you're a senior? It's wild, y'all. We're supposed to have plans with plans that have backup plans. And then those backup plans have plans too. Timelines, outcomes, explanations for everything. We are a culture that demands certainty for everything. But transformation, evolution, I'll say, evolution of the self, it doesn't really give you any of those things up front. And for the last few months of 2025, when somebody asked me those questions that I mentioned, like, what are you going to do next? The only answer that was honest that I had was, I don't know. And that fucking sucked. Let's just call it what it is. It was awful because not knowing really can feel like failure. Even when it's actually the beginning of something new. Like, even when we know there is something unfolding, when we don't have details to it yet, we don't have specifics of it yet, it can feel like failure. And I just didn't know. I didn't know any of it. What I did know in my soul, in my gut, in my bones, was that I felt pulled towards this path that I'm on now. More public speaking, sharing the process of evolution, of transformation, of expansion, instead of just the result, right? Because like we talked about, like, we love the before and after, but we don't really talk a lot about the messy middle. And I feel pulled to talk more about that, to open up people's eyes to what that process really looks like so that they're not walking into it disillusioned, because I did. Before and after. And somewhere along the way, you just sort of discard all the work that goes on in the middle. You sort of discard that messiness in the middle. Like, you sort of just throw it out like, oh, it's before and after. Why am I not there yet? Right? And we just kind of forget that, like, there's all this space in between. And I feel pulled to talk about that more. I feel pulled to hone in on that and to really, really expose that for what it is so that we're not afraid moving into it. We're not confused when it happens. I don't want to just share the results. Don't want to just share what it looks like after the fact. Here's my after picture. I want to expose the messy middle of evolution, the messy middle of transformation. And I'm learning along the way to trust that pull. I'm learning to trust myself in real time. Y'all are seeing this, okay? I'm learning to believe in myself before it makes logical sense. And that lesson, it is one of the scariest and hardest lessons I've really ever learned. I'm still learning it. And for me, it wasn't some big dramatic thing where it was like one day, I just decided like everything would change. Mostly it was like little things that just kept dropping. Little things that I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Okay, I accept that. I don't want to do this anymore. Ooh, okay, that's a big one. I do kind of want to do this. It was like these little things that just kept coming to me little bits at a time as I became more open to the truth, as I stopped pushing everything away and I decided to face all the crazy turmoil going on inside my head and my heart. I decided to not run from it anymore. I would face all of it and I would figure out what it all meant. There was a decision to pay more attention to myself and to notice in those moments where my energy expanded, where I felt alive and excited, and to notice the things that made me feel like pulled in, really contracted and heavy, like hunched in on myself. Like when I walked into my studio and I made a decision to notice which ideas I kept coming back to, like no matter how many times I ignored him, they'd pop back in, right? And okay, that's a repeat. Maybe I should maybe I should take notice of that, right? I made that decision to like pay attention to those things. And eventually I did find the courage to face the questions that changed everything about my life and are in the process of changing, right? Am I staying in this life because it feels true, because it feels right? Or am I staying in this life because I'm afraid of who I might be without it? And I realized that, the cost of staying, if you will, the cost of keeping the status quo and just leaving my life as is was a lot higher than the fear of leaving it. The fear was big, y'all. Like, listen, the fear was real. But I realized that the price I would pay for pretending like I wasn't being pulled in another direction was higher, was bigger, was worse. If you're watching this and there's something in your life that feels maybe just a little bit too tight, just feels like, oh, it doesn't fit anymore. It's too restrictive. Or maybe it's just too heavy. Maybe you just feel weighed down by it. I want you to hear this clearly. Outgrowing something does not mean you failed at it. Sometimes outgrowing something means that you loved it fully and it served its purpose in your journey, but its purpose is done, it's fulfilled. Evolution is never comfortable. Expansion is never comfortable because it asks us to let go of certainty. And it asks us to do that before clarity arrives. Like before we have the steps forward, we're asked to completely jump off the path, right? And the reality is it's scary as fuck, but it's necessary. Leaving my art career, it wasn't about failure. It was about integration. It was about the life I built and everything that I had learned along the way, every piece of creativity and the lessons that I learned. I learned so much about myself and who I was throughout all that. All of that is coming with me into this next chapter. We don't leave the lessons behind, right? It's just that world, that path is not the right container for me anymore. It doesn't fit anymore. And that realization helped me understand something really, really important, that sometimes honoring your past really means allowing it to be a chapter instead of like forcing it to be your entire story. It doesn't need to go on forever. You don't need to stay in it for it to maintain its value. Sometimes its value increases after you stepped away from it. Sometimes we learn things about who we were and who we are becoming because we take the chance, because we have the courage to step away from it. And this evolution I'm talking about, this transformation, whatever you want to call it. I like the word evolution because I feel like it reminds me of like the butterfly scenario, right? And it's like we're literally becoming something else. And I feel like transformation doesn't always quite touch that, but both words, whatever works for you. And there's something about it that really is true and needs to be known. It's that it doesn't happen in isolation, right? It doesn't happen just this cute little neat box. Oh, I'm evolving. Here is this little pretty package, right? When you change your life, when you really upend everything, or even just, a big thing in your life, when you leave a relationship, when you change careers, when you whatever, it touches the people that you love. It touches the people around you, your relationships, your family, your kids. And sometimes this is the part that isn't as comfortable or fun to talk about, but it's real. Sometimes there are social consequences, if you will, for reinvention. Okay. I'd be lying if I said there weren't. And this is that messy middle we were talking about, right? People thinking you're crazy, people that will project their fear onto you, people who genuinely love you, but are worried about you and about what's going to happen. And I think maybe the hardest part is the loneliness. It's the loneliness of choosing a path that other people can't understand. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about that transition. I'm going to talk about this part. I'm going to talk about how it affects the people around you and how to navigate people's reactions to you choosing a path that doesn't make sense to them. Because people's judgment really does mean more about them than about your decision, but it doesn't make it any easier to hear. Thank you for being here with me. Welcome to the detour.